So, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today's SCALEup webinar. My name is Ulrike Tusk. I'm the global offline expert at DCMN, and I joined DCMN last year in July for supporting our clients' growth with a data-driven approach to offline marketing. So today's webinar is an exciting one for me because at first it's my first one, sorry. And I can speak to my previous colleague, Deepa. So we work together at Babbel and she is still there as a vice president of marketing. Deepa Miglani, good to see you. How are you today?
Hi, Ulrike. Good to talk to you. And thank you so much for having me. And talking to you feels like a throwback to old times. So I'm really happy to be here.
Cool. So before we get started, if you have any questions, so for the audience, if you have any questions during this conversation, please type them into the question box. Probably you can see them on your control panel. We will then have time for questions at the end, and we will do our best to get through it at each of them at the point. So now that we covered all the essentials, Deepa, to you. So tell us, how has language learning been affected by the changing world over the past years?
Wow, that's a great question. How has language learning changed in the past years? Okay, so I can address your question in two parts. The first being the stats for the category. The online education vertical overall has seen dramatic shifts in the last year and a half, right? So when it comes to language learning specifically, globally, it is approximately a $40 to $50 billion market category, right? Digital self-study makes up a smaller part of the category. And this was the category that grew dramatically in the last year and a half, while naturally the offline part shrunk. The second part, and this is super interesting to me as a marketer and hopefully to the marketers who have joined us today, is how consumer attitude to digital self-study changed during the last year and a half. What we saw was a much faster adoption of digital self-study than ever before. Consumers overcame their perceived barriers against digital self-study, and we saw a much higher engagement with the app during this time. Other structural global changes like globalization, increasing mobility, technological improvements, the sheer convenience of on-demand online learning, and a higher return on time and money compared to offline mechanisms. These are fueling the growth in our category, and I think they will continue fueling the growth in the online language learning category in the years to come.
Sounds really interesting, especially for Babbel. So, and how did Babbel react to this? Was there any concrete action which changed?
Oh heavens, like the last year and a half has been a year of roller coaster rides. We reacted to the global lockdown situation, or as the lockdown started happening, we started reacting to the situation right away. Like from one day to the next, we literally changed the scale and the breadth and the depth of our marketing. We actually didn't just throttle, we kind of opened up the spigot. Now, anecdotally, and from what our marketing partners tell us, I can say that Babbel's marketing team was literally first to the game in reacting to consumer interest in language learning. So agile and reactive in this particular situation is a very good thing. Thinking back, it was a rough and really tragic time globally, and it had to be handled strategically, gently, with a lot of thought and caution. There was fear, there was panic, and we were very careful about the right message at the right time, in the right channel. So that was the whole package of our reaction.
Okay, this sounds like a lot of things which you had to handle. So, and how do you support, or did you support the world of education during this time?
Another great question. So at Babbel, I really believe we live and breathe our values. And one of our core values is that we are a learning company inside out. Now, our purpose is promoting mutual understanding through languages, and we literally put our money where our mouth is. So we reacted very rapidly in response to school closures globally, and we gave free access to Babbel for more than 150,000 students worldwide.
Oh, this is a really impressive number. So
it was a grand scale response to a major crisis. And we did what we could to support the student community around the world. Clearly, we take our social responsibility quite seriously.
So this sounds really, really interesting and impressive. So how would you advise other companies to react in similar situation, whether it's another economic crisis, political situation, or maybe a natural disaster? So is there any concrete or specific advice you could give?
Well, I sure hope we don't have another crisis like this one or any other crisis. But since that cannot be guaranteed or predicted, and talking of guarantees, one of my favorite books of all time is Nassim Taleb's Black Swan. You know, one of those books that you read and you kind of file away and hope that you never live the circumstances. The book talks about unpredictable and improbable events and how they can shape our world. Now, 2020 and COVID was a total black swan event, if we've ever seen one, and it shook all of us up. My learning from this tumultuous year is that the highly improbable can happen and unpredictable events will shape our world. Therefore, my perspective is that companies have to be ready, both with long-term strategic plans, but keep enough headroom for short-term turn of events. So be ready to pivot in short order. The only way to be ready for unpredictable events is to also always be testing. Now, our philosophy of test, learn, rinse, and repeat allowed us to adapt and shape the scale and breadth of our marketing during this time. As far as I can remember, we pulled out hundreds of channel hat tricks during this time. Actually, one last thought that is not just specific to unpredictable circumstances, but kind of generally. We need to build solutions that consumers want, create products that solve a consumer need and a consumer problem, and not build a product just because we think it's cool. So that is how we can always be prepared for any unpredictable circumstance that may present itself, but hopefully not.
Yeah, I think especially this creating a product which solves needs and not just being as a product out there. I think this is very important and relevant. So Babbel has grown a lot over the past few years. Are there any markets that you had a lot of success in, or maybe to phrase it a little bit more different? So are you had any markets which are very specifically challenging? So looking a little bit on the English-speaking market. So I heard that the Brits are not so into language learning. So how did you manage that? How did you tackle the different markets?
So we are the leading language learning brand in Europe, right? But one success story, since you talked about the English-speaking market, one success story that I'm super proud of is the US. Now, our research in the US told us that a large portion of our target market in the US has a nascent interest in language learning. I mean, everybody we spoke to said that they do want to learn a language, but life gets in the way and the perception that with English, you can literally get by anywhere in the world. Well, my perspective is that you might be able to get by, but you will not have the rich and the meaningful experiences that speaking the local language brings you. So we tapped into consumer needs and we tapped into the gratification that consumers really want, and we use that in our messaging. And not just serendipitously, like Babbel actually delivers on that, right? The ability to have real conversations and not just speak a few random words. So the combination of our team's media expertise, our communication and messaging skills, and Babbel's core unique selling proposition worked out super well for us in the English-speaking markets.
Okay, cool, very interesting. So what channels have been especially useful in your growth strategy during these times, or maybe making it a little bit more generic? So, or which channels are generally speaking very useful for you?
Yeah. So our channel strategy is quite ubiquitous, right? In both digital and in offline. And without giving away our secret sauce, specifically referring back to the last year and a half, I can say that digital channels, which have a much shorter runway. So we tapped into a variety of social channels. Well, actually, let me state it a different way. We scaled all the channels which offered a potential for scale based on consumer interest. For example, tapping into the impression volume available. We also tapped into many new social channels that we tested during that time. We pulled out all the other channels that we had tested in the past. We were not using them actively during those times. We actively started using those as well. The other channel, or the other stream of channels that I'm super excited about, is digital audio as well. Now, digital audio podcasts especially have a much longer runway though, but this channel I think is going to be formative in terms of how consumers and brands create the connection between each other, and the success that brands create through tapping into new channels that are coming their way.
Yeah, to be honest, so I wasn't really a podcast fan beforehand, but since 1.5 years, I'm listening to podcasts, and meanwhile quite dedicated. So I'm a little bit surprised about myself, but therefore I'm thinking it's really an interesting channel which has to be used carefully, but it's definitely working very well. So
this
sorry.
This channel is quite interesting, right? The demand, you do not have to push out your message to the demand. Consumers tap into the message when they are, so it's a pull factor, it's not a push factor. And the pull factor creates for a very dedicated audience. And the kind of advertising we are seeing on podcasts is really fascinating, right? It's the message driven by the brand. It could be the message read by the host. So it offers a whole lot of variety and also scalability.
Fantastic. Thanks for that insight. So what's coming next for language learning?
Wow, a big question. Okay. Language learning is obviously a very attractive and still a growing market, right? Our estimate is that we are expecting it is going to continue growing at CAGR of give or take 10 to 12% over the next few years, primarily in digital self-study. Now, the space is getting more and more cluttered, and other brands borrow our messaging playbook, but very few brands actually focus on creating a real consumer success. My belief is that brands that offer real solutions, address real consumer needs, and are focused on creating consumer success stories, that is where the growth lies. Brands like Babbel, where we have more than 180 experts creating a product that is 100% focused on consumer needs. I mean, our pedagogical and technical chops, with these, I expect that we will continue expanding our market share.
Yeah, and this about the experts is something what I can really agree on. So the experts are really, really into language and language learning. This is definitely very impressive how many polyglot people are working at Babbel. It was always really impressive. So coming more or less slowly to an end for this part. So are you learning a language, and if so, which one, and what's your biggest challenge?
Yes, I'm now in Berlin. I live in Germany, so I am learning German. And I think by far, getting the first few words out in an unpredictable situation was, for me, the biggest angst. And it's, from my perspective, it's not an easy language to learn, right? But then even when you are making some headway with learning the language, when it comes to that moment where you actually have to speak it, you freeze up, or I froze up. Language learning is hard work, but when you are at the other end, like when you're actually beginning to speak a few words of the new language, albeit with errors, it is so rewarding. The encouraging words that you hear from people with whom you speak the new language, for example, Deepa, du sprichst sehr gut Deutsch. And then, kein Problem, wir sprechen langsam. And I say, danke, danke. These are life-changing moments. And I'm super, super honored that I got to experience these life-changing moments, because this was when I really understood what a consumer feels when they are not only going through the process of language learning, but when they get to the moment when they're actually experiencing the gratification of being able to speak a language. So thanks to Babbel.
Yes, and I can definitely say we already discussed some stuff before we started the webinar in German. So I was really impressed how you managed it so far, and really looking forward to have some further chats with you in German. So slowly we can go to the Q&A section. Give me a second to go through the questions. So, and to give you some, so in the US, you are one of the leading audio advertisers, digital and analog. So what are the success factors there?
I kind of already referred to it a little bit. So it's a combination of multiple things. So finding the right audience, the target audience that you believe is the right audience for you to communicate the value of your product. What channels is this particular target audience consuming? So audio, and what we've done in the US, our target consumers happen to tap into radio quite a bit. So that's one part. The media that is relevant for the target audience. Second part is the message that you are communicating. In terms of the message, I already referred to it in our chat earlier, that it is all about tapping into the consumer need, the consumer psychology, and then Babbel actually delivers on that self-gratification of being able to speak a language. So a combination of what the consumer needs and how you play into that need from the consumer. And then the rest of it is all about data, data, data. A lot of statistical analysis in terms of which particular channel is working, which day part is working, how do we test additional channels. We literally spent about a year and a half testing, learning, rinsing, repeating, iterating, and growing, and super proud of the success that we've created in audio.
I can really, so we at DCMN have this test, learn, scale approach as well. And I can just really underline that testing is key in everything. So how are you gathering customer success stories and how do you distribute them among perspectives?
Great question. So this is an area where I would ideally want to expand quite a bit in the future. But where we are today, in our labs with our research team, we focus a lot on speaking to our consumers to understand what their needs are, how our product serves the needs, what kind of success we've created or what we've created for them. A few success stories that I can mention. There is one of our consumers in the UK. His son got married to someone from Spain, and at the wedding, he did the wedding speech in Spanish. We also have stories about, I don't remember the exact age, but one of our oldest customers, he's been using Babbel for a long, long time. And I think for Italian, but my PR team will correct me if I say this wrong. So we speak to our consumers very, very frequently within our labs team, which is the research team, our customer success team, and also the PR team. We gather these stories and we use them from two angles: for internal inspiration and continue feeding that information to our product teams in terms of what the consumers really need from our product. So in terms of the features that we are developing, in terms of the future development that we are doing organically for the product, and specifically as it relates to creating engagement for the product, for the consumers in the product, what are their pain points? How do we get the consumers from one success moment to another success moment? For instance, we call them aha moments, because these multiple aha moments is what creates long-term success.
Very interesting, very cool. So, and it seems we have some US focus today here. No, this is a nice question. So what is your favorite German word?
Genau, genau.
Okay, why is this word?
Somehow this word has so many meanings just beyond agreeing. It brings people together in some sort of tribal understanding of the topic that was put on the table. It's about not only creating agreement, it's about nodding your agreement. Somehow it's just well, there's another word which I will not be able to speak now. My favorite German word. So when I was moving to Berlin, I had to register, I had to do my Anmeldung, right? But the form that you have for the Anmeldung, that has 3 words put together in one word. So 24 letters in that word. It starts with a Wohnung. It probably ends with an Anmeldung. Scared me a lot that this is the language that I was going to learn. But then once I understood the meaning of those 3 words together, yeah, it makes it my favorite word.
I see. You are you are very close to the German bureaucracy. So, to be honest, this is very challenging for Germans as well. So, this is a really interesting question, because this is probably really interesting for a lot of companies and marketers out there. So, what is the best way to combine brand building offline advertising, for example, TV, with digital ads while maintaining both message consistency and conversion cost efficiency?
Great question. I'll take it a little bit broader. Consistency is a continuous challenge that marketers have to contend with, because each channel has its own very, very specific needs. But if you're operating from a tight yet adaptable playbook of your customer value proposition, it becomes easier to pull the different pillars that would be suitable for a particular channel and excuse me, sip of water.
Take your time.
Pull a specific messaging pillar into what would be appropriate and likely to drive conversion in a particular channel, but use that cohesively across all your channels. The second angle over here is also a lot of orientation towards data. For example, it's not only about the messaging, it is about the channel you use. It is also about the time, the day part when you're advertising. The combination of all of these, especially for an offline marketer, it is very, very hard to figure out which of the three different variables that might be at play at a given time is creating the conversion. For example, was it the message? We introduced a new campaign. Was it a new campaign that was effective? Did we introduce a new media strategy? Did we introduce new day parts at the same time? Did we change the funnel at the same time? So peeling apart these variables and arriving at a confidence in terms of what is actually converting or giving the benefit, what the approach that we take, we like to control as many variables as we can at a given time. So instead of rolling out multiple variables at the same time, we try to do one control variable, one additional new variable, and that helps us. As it relates to digital channels, however, now search engine marketing has very different needs and very different limitations compared to social advertising, for instance. So overall, if you have a framework and a messaging playbook with the understanding of what a specific channel requires for it to create effective conversions, you can borrow from that consistent playbook, but use the messages and their variety across different channels.
Wow, this sounds really, let's say, complex to put everything together. But I think when you manage that, then it's you are really done with marketing. So how do you operationally interconnect marketing / sales and product management to ensure that you really meet customer needs?
Another great question. It is that loop. We roll out something in marketing, we wait for the consumer's reaction, we do research on top of that, understand what the consumers are saying, look at what the data is telling us. This continuous process of feeding the information back to the product teams, along with a whole lot of due diligence in terms of the research that our product team does, in terms of what is the consumer need, what is the problem that we are trying to solve, how does one feature benefit the consumer versus another feature, how are we going about creating long-term consumer success in terms of starting with one aha moment to the other aha moment. This is all an interconnected, complicated wheel, but it's the feedback loop, the constant information sharing, the constant giving back of data, exchange of data, and keeping each other informed of what is coming in terms of product development. How does that feed into consumer needs? When we roll out a new feature, how are consumers reacting, feeding that information back to the product teams. So this continuous loop is how we continue to create one success on top of the other.
So this sounds like a lot of communication is happening internally, so which is, by the way, really great. So now we are seeing, so besides that, really a lot of questions are coming in. I hope we can really manage everything. So now with that, we are seeing that the world is open up slowly again, on some areas a little bit faster as on the others. But how has Babbel's marketing strategy changed as the world has opened up and it is possible to travel again? Is that happening?
Another great question. So one of the key elements is messaging and your creative. Creative has a huge impact on consumer response. But you have to do this very, very carefully and very, very strategically. For instance, at one point in time, when we were in the pandemic, when the situation was pretty traumatic for all brands, literally everybody was tapping into a few signals that they were using in terms of the messaging playbook. As we started coming out of it, a lot of people started tapping into travel, etc. Our strategy, even though we pivoted and tuned our messaging a lot to consumer needs, we also have an evergreen strategy. So language learning is the success of language learning is a very intangible thing. How do you demonstrate that success to a consumer in a creative, right? It's about people, it's about travel, etc. So that is a part of our evergreen strategy in terms of the messaging elements that we use in our creative. But when you step out of just simply the messaging, the channel strategy, for instance, travel opportunities or travel specific partnerships were an opportunity that dried up during COVID times. Those opportunities seem to be opening up for us now. So we are taking this from two angles. Angle number one, communication, a portion of it always evergreen strategy, along with seasonal messaging that seems to be relevant, always tapping into consumer psychology and needs. And the second angle is not only seasonally, but strategically from a macro circumstance perspective, what is the appropriate channel where consumers are gravitating, which we need to test, start using. So we take this approach to address both the elements.
Okay, cool. Very interesting question here. What do you feel the impact of AI will be on language learning?
Technology is a foundation, but the expertise, pedagogical expertise is the other layer on top of that. So from Babbel's perspective, our pedagogical expertise is what created foundationally a very, very effective product. As it relates to artificial intelligence in terms of how we are going to leverage all the data connected tools that are available to us, we are tapping into what is the right feature, what is the right message, what is the right information to put in front of a consumer to create the long-term success that a consumer is going to experience from language learning. The technology world is shifting, changing every day. So how technology is going to impact products, at least for me, I cannot predict that, but we are leveraging every technological quiver in our bow in our quiver to be able to deliver consumers a successful language learning experience.
Okay, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. How it's going and how you are implementing then it in the future, maybe in your product. So, looking at the time, I would say we have big time for a last question. So then, retention must be a huge focus for your performance marketing. How do you strike the right balance between acquiring new users and retaining existing ones? And can you share any specific retention strategies that work well for your users?
Another great question. Look, we're in the game of creating consumer success and not just driving growth through best-in-class marketing, right? So our focus is on building solutions that consumers need for language learning success. And I already referred to it, right? Creating success moments when they use the app, and these success moments become the foundation for retention because consumers engage with their learning and their learning curve and their learning journey. That is the focus of the product teams, and that is their mission. We use every strategy in the marketing playbook and then some to retain our consumers through CRM, right? Emails, in-app notifications, nudging users to both use the product, but also bask in the glory of their success moments. My favorite ones are the quizzes that we send to our consumers based on the recent lesson that they might have completed. Look, I'm a marketer, and even I get excited with these quizzes that come to me in email. So we use a combination of both the product and CRM for retention.
Okay, Cool. So now we have to come to an end. So I have to say huge thanks to you, Deepa, for your time and for giving some insights about Babbel and so on. And thank you to the audience for your interest and for all the interesting questions. So I wish you a fantastic further Wednesday, and Deepa, hopefully seeing you soon and we can chat in German then.
Ich habe Angst für Deutsch sprechen, but it was my pleasure to be here and an honor to participate in this. Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot and have a good day. Bye.